Hello, Dr. Moschner. We are really happy to have you here in the studio of Invest Foresight on the sidelines of Gaidar Forum arranged by the Presidential Academy of National Economy. And to start with, may I have your opinion as a professional investor and most experienced professional in finance to underline what are the most important aspects for investing and for investors? What should their behavior be guided by, and how essential is financial and investment literacy for activities which many people strive to get involved with, but very many people fail as well?
First, thank you for being here. I'm very excited at this Gaidar Forum because it is a kind of not Russia in a nutshell. It's a lot of, at least political statements that we see here, how Russia is going to develop. This adds on the experience that we had in searching for projects in Russia in the last years now, 3 to 4 years. Just one short remark on financial literacy, which, of course, from my point of investor, is the most important part we are looking at, because life would be much easier for an investor if financial literacy were more developed in Russia. Interestingly, the last meeting, the last conference tomorrow will be exactly on this subject. For me personally, it's the most important one, from my point of view, of course. What do I mean by that? We have seen dozens of projects in the last, just in the last half of a year, and it is absolutely amazing, or staggering, I would dare to say, how naive Russian entrepreneurs are in their demands and what they expect from investors like us. This could be, when investment is moving according to certain rules, quite simple rules practically. Most of this is common sense in reality, but even to understand the rules, under which conditions an investor is prepared to act is not yet commonplace here. It's not completely excluded, but it was until now. On the other hand, you could ask me, why do you need why do you want to invest altogether? As a financial investor, you're always depending on the partner you're giving money to. Practically, investing means you give money to somebody who is supposed to grow with this money, but not only money. If it's smart money, which is the best way of investing, because anything else is burning money, but smart money means you invest, and then you help a partner whom you believe in to grow. What in our case would mean help to expand, help to export, seek new markets, improve marketing, a very specific issue, by the way. And from this base, you can then start and move. That means you need an entrepreneur as a partner. And this partner will take responsibility for working. Here in Russia, we very often run into this, or we mostly ran into this situation that the kind of partner we would like has already achieved something, of course, otherwise he wouldn't
qualify
as a partner. But this gives so much self-confidence that these personalities think they can make their own rules. And that doesn't work in the world of investment, because the rules are clearly set. You can't say 1 and 1 is 3 or even 5 to the disadvantage of your partner, of your investment partner.
Yet the rules can evolve or abruptly change over time. And it's not always you who can influence that. You can take the situation, accept it or not. But
I agree to some extent, whereby the rules of I'm 40 years now in investment, and the rules never changed because it's pure common sense. The environment changes sometimes. When you are in a boom phase, then sometimes people have a tendency of taking more risk at a lower price. Whether this is prudent or not is a different issue, and whoever is not prudent enough to keep to the rules, but to bend to rules that other people make, usually loses a lot of money.
But generally speaking, how would you qualify or assess investment climate in this country?
So, apart from the problem of finding the right partner, for me this is a pity, this situation with the partners, because all the rest, most other conditions are great here in Russia. You have everything you want practically. You have a great and a large country, both ways. You have
which is both advantage and disadvantage, by the way.
Yeah, I see it more as an advantage.
Okay, great.
Because from an investor's point of view, the bigger the market, if you put it down to financials, the better for you, the easier to grow, because it's always more difficult to move abroad, move to internationalize. This is also the reason why we are where we help. Of course, you could say smaller countries better for us because then we are needed more. May also be, yeah, because Russia has a big market, internal market. We have seen situations here, by the way, even situations where we are now getting closer. We do first steps, we cooperate with owners, where products were developed that are absolutely great, very interesting in all kinds of, several industries. And the companies live very nicely from the Russian market. It's big enough. The product is so interesting that we knocked on their doors and say, just why don't you deliver, why don't you export that? And then you run into issues like language and just mentality, but this can be changed. Good, but we are getting into details again. Let me get back to the general. You have a highly educated workforce is too technical perhaps, but highly educated people, very high quality of life compared to other places where we are. Of course, you don't compare directly to Vienna or London, but it's good to live here. So what else do you need? Some issues that were discussed at the Gaida forums, more to the negative, of course, is bureaucracy. But bureaucracy, to be honest, you've got bureaucracy everywhere on the globe. So this is it's technical you can cope with. And at least here, I hear a lot of very entrepreneur-friendly words. It just will be an issue whether these are words
or deeds.
Whether we will see deeds.
Yeah.
But the way they are presented, very solemn, and when I look at what happened in Moscow alone in the last 2 years, I mean, we've seen a lot of development. It's amazing how Moscow has not changed, but developed, really, and grown, improved. So when another example, just to see, we are also in the countryside, not only in Moscow. When I look at Tula, for example, how Tula developed in the last 2 years, absolutely amazing. It's a good example. They didn't even need investor. They took themselves on their own hair and throwing them out of the swamp by their own force, just by activity. Unfortunately, this is not nothing where we can join, but a very good example of what can be achieved in Russia from own forces. And there's one very specific side, by the way, where investors can also play a role. this is sanctions. You might be surprised, but sanctions offer a big chance to Russia. They forced Russia, the country as a whole, to take advantage of their own strength, to build or rebuild many industries or aspects of industries where they were depending on imports. And it happened. I mean, we have seen companies that replaced European products, were built in replacing European products, sometimes by Russians themselves.
But would you say that it is essential for any nation to be self-sufficient, or in the current day world of globalization and separation of specialities and production and agriculture and elsewhere, whether we should all be striving to be all by ourselves or still somehow get together and not be divided by whatever, but still this specializing in our own most exceptional, most professional area?
Yeah, as a classical liberal, of course, I think we all read Smith and Ricardo and division of labor between the nations. Of course, the ideal world would be one without economic borders, at least, where each country or each nation can focus on its strength, and there's an exchange of goods. But when this dream, and this, we were on the way to some extent in the 90s and 80s to achieve that. But when this kind of exchange is interrupted by whatever interest and power, whatever kind of political opinion you might have on that, but when it's interrupted, you have to react. You have to replace what is lacking, and in general. But this, in Russia, I think this was Russia is a special case in this relationship, because Russia, it gave a kick to Russia to move forward, and also to some extent foreign entrepreneurs helped, because the most successful places of what is called import substitution are foreigners, foreign companies, non-Russian, whose market shares were severely impacted by the sanctions, but who said, we don't let the Russian market go. So when we are not allowed to export, then we move and build ourselves. We build a factory there. By the way, these are also for us as investors at the moment, the most desirable cases, because in that case, somebody is buffering the Russian problems. It has solved for us, I mean, the kind of naivete that I was mentioning in the beginning. But again, it kicked Russia forward, and what I can see, it helped in quite a few industries. It was, of course, negative motivation from a liberal point of free market point of view, but in the end, it doesn't matter where the motivation comes from. If it helps, it helps. And as a European, I really must fear that when the sanctions are ended, the capacities that were built here now in certain industries are so strong and also so price efficient that they will now, they would be able, when they are allowed to import into Europe, they would cause a lot of difficulties for several existing industries, because they are simply stronger and more price efficient.
And your opinion, is it shared by the business community in Austria, for example? Well, the view of sanctions and the view of economic interlinks between Russia and
no,
EU.
Of course, I could say I'm not the official speaker there, but of course I'm a member and I'm listening, and we meet regularly. Most of them share it, yes.
Okay.
Because we are, we have an advantage compared to those Europeans that are more Western to Austria. We are closer, and I think also history proves that we always have been closer. And so for us, we are very critical towards these sanctions, It doesn't help anybody. So, but it helped Russia. So, what shall I say about that? Yeah,
well, it's also one of the experiences, and we have all sorts of experiences, economic experiences as well, and we have to learn from them and to move forward and to find advantages in every, even bad things. Therefore, let me put a question like that. How do you see the prospects of EU as a regional association in its economic, primarily relationships with Russia?
Good. As a critics of the European Union as it is today, I do not want to devolve into this too far. Because when the European Union is led by people who act against the interest of the European people, your question is difficult to answer for me, because all I can say is as soon as we get rid of those people that act against the interest of the European people, the situation will change. The question is, will we have a chance to do that? When you look at France, what is happening there today, France normally was a country quite friendly to Russia, but when it comes to sanctions, the existing regime is not very Russian friendly. You see that there are efforts to change, or at least change the course of this regime, but this has cost quite a few lives in the last weeks and many, many injuries. So I don't dare to give any prognosis whether the regimes that we have at the moment in the dominating countries will change. But when they change, the dialogue with Russia should become more friendly again.
You have mentioned the interests of the people in Europe. So, in your opinion, what would serve those interests in the best possible way, well, economy-wise?
I have already outed myself as a classical liberal. So a classical liberal in the sense of von Mises and Hayek. And I also believe that everybody, or the most people, want to improve their well-being, their welfare, want to have a certain stage of life. And and I'm not so sure at the moment that what I can see in some, at least in the major European countries, that the well-being of the people is in the forefront of the governing regimes. And so does that answer? Is this an answer to your question? Because still industry is keeping on. Miraculously, the economy is still steaming forward because people don't stop working, don't stop inventing. Even there's less investment, of course, in this kind of environment, but still sufficient. But and well-being of one block, because the world is getting one place practically. I don't like globalization as a word, but in fact, borderless economy and exchange of advantage is a main source of improving well-being. And as such, having said that, it's absolutely clear that only a functioning exchange of goods and also free, not only free trade, but also free movement of people between Russia and Europe is desirable. Both blocks are so strong in itself that cooperating would achieve much more positive effects for people than the kind of quarrel that we have at the moment.
Speaking about people and benefits for everyone, we cannot avoid mentioning the energy context between Russia and the European Union, and specifically some troubles that were experienced in that regard, as far as building new pipelines are concerned, as far as the third energy package goes, and as far as Germany is becoming the major and monopolistic actually hub of Russian energy supplies to Europe. How would you assess such a situation from your investor's point of view?
To be honest, this is a kind of aspect that goes beyond. But I'm a microeconomic investor. I'm not investing in companies that are so big that they are a player in this kind of field. We are investing in services companies, to oil, to mineral or petrol companies, but not in this aspect. Of course, it is. And it's one of the reasons why you think twice when you do something in Germany, because what happens when Russia plays this card? But it's a mutual dependence, and so this is also why we don't understand what is going on here on the political side and why it is going on. Who has an interest of making trouble? For me personally, I haven't yet answered who really has an interest in causing all these kinds of troubles, because there's always an interest between nations and between economic blocs. There is it's not an ideological question. It's a question who is acting, who is doing what, in whose interest. And I don't understand yet in whose interest, for example, the German government is operating. What they say and what they do is so diverse, but somebody will benefit. Somebody benefits from this kind of trouble, of course. And usually the answer is to be found when you know who is the or at least you get close to the answer, let me put it that way, when you know who is the benefactor of, when it's always the same. When, there's an old proverb in German, I try to translate it to English, but I think when two start fighting, always the third one wins. And this is exactly the same situation here.
Well, we shall hope that we all will find ourselves in a win-win situation.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate very much your time and your opinions. And thank you very much for sharing your time with us and our audience.
Thanks, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you.